Welcome to episode number 21 of the Dugout Report. I am here with Tyler Jennings, talking college baseball, and I'm happy to have you on and hear your thoughts on how the season is going.
I appreciate you guys having me on. It's going to be a fun recording, so I'm excited for it.
So my first question is, what are your thoughts on the number two ranked team in the country, Wake Forest?
So Wake Forest for me, we knew this was going to be a really good team coming into the year. I don't think we expected it to be quite as good as it has been. It's just a dynamic offense and a dynamic pitching staff. When you're looking at the ERA total for the full year, Wake Forest is the best pitching staff in the country by almost a whole run. Their ERA average is a 2.4, and the next closest team is a 3.38. It's a really, really fun staff to go through. You look at the rotation, you have Rhett Lauder, Sean Sullivan, Josh Hartle have all really turned a corner this year, especially Hartle. Hartle had a tough time his freshman year. And he's now turned in a sub 2 ERA, and he's turned into an ace with the addition of a cutter to his arsenal. And Rhett Lauder has just continued to be the Rhett Lauder we knew last year too. And Sean Sullivan has come from Northwestern and just completely dominated out of now the Friday role. They've switched it up a little bit. He's the Friday starter. And they still have like Cole Rowland, Camden Minacci, Michael Massey has turned into a legitimate bullpen arm in that staff as well. And then you look at the lineup itself when you have Nick Kurtz and Brock Wilken back to back in the lineup being the mashers, and then you have Tommy Hawk being the spark plug at the top. It's just a really, really good team. It's well rounded. This is a team that I will be honest, I'll be shocked if they don't make it to Omaha and if they don't win the ACC tournament outright. They're like 37-6, 16-4 in conference. It's just a really, really good team.
My next question is, what are your thoughts on Coastal Carolina and uh, how deep do you think they can go in the conference tournament when it arrives?
Yeah, Coastal is a pretty fun team offensively. They're one of the high octane offenses in the entire country. I do believe they're like six in total runs scored in the country. And they got a pretty easy schedule to end out the year. They go to App State this upcoming weekend, and they get Clemson in the midweek, who's probably their biggest opponent coming up here. And then they go to South Alabama. That might be an interesting matchup, mainly because South Alabama does have a couple arms that keep that offense in check. And then they end the year with Marshall. But this is the favorite for the Sun Belt. I feel like if they're able to end the year strong and then get to Montgomery and rally through that tournament, this is a top eight seed in the country. And I mean, just even with that offense, like Derek Bender, Caden Bodine's been really, really good too. Looking at their pitching staff, there's some things to work out on. Matthew Patak has turned out into a really good arm. Liam Doyle is a reliable bullpen piece, and then you got Teddy Sharkey, who's just one of the more dynamic relievers in the country with a fastball that touches 98 and two really good breaking balls. This is a team that could be really, really dangerous once you get to regional play. And dare I say, Gary Gilmore might have another shot at Omaha here.
Mhm. My next question is, what are your thoughts on Florida and uh, what do you think about the remainder of the schedule?
Florida is I still love Florida as a team as a whole. Like Kevin O'Sullivan is a really, really good coach. They're 35-10 right now, but whenever I saw them South Carolina in that series, South Carolina swept them, and it wasn't even a particularly close matchup. I think it was like a 25-10 outscore on that one. Florida just looked really, really rough. And to end out their season right now, like you've still got Texas A&M. You got to go to College Station this upcoming weekend. Texas A&M has really turned a corner. Vanderbilt is still one of the top teams in the SEC East, and then you got Kentucky, who they're a really good squad, but they're also ending the year on a very, very tough schedule. Um, Florida's not got it easy the remainder of the way, and with the way that their pitching staff is, like Brandon Sproat, Hurston Waldrop, and Jack Caglianone are dynamic arms. They're just to start games, they're not exactly the greatest. Like Hurston Waldrep, first 3 innings against South Carolina, gave up a couple runs, but then he started pitching backwards, middle of his outing, and he looked dynamic. And then their bullpen just isn't good either. There were a couple of times during that South Carolina series where they, like, for example, the first game, Brandon Sproat was taken out in the sixth inning, bring in Philip Abner, who walked three straight, and then you bring in another reliever who walked two more in a row with two outs and essentially gave South Carolina the advantage to run rule them in that first game. It's a troublesome thing, but that offense can also score a lot of runs to kind of keep the pitching woes at bay. But at some point, as you get towards that Vandy series, and of course when you get to Kentucky, which is in Lexington, it's going to be interesting to see how that shapes out for Florida. And they might be in a little bit of trouble, but this is still a team that will ultimately end up hosting a regional once we get towards tournament play.
What games will you be keeping a close eye on in the coming days?
Yeah, this weekend's got a pretty decent lineup coming up. In the ACC, Wake Forest and Boston College have a really good matchup that's coming up this weekend. Wake Forest, we talked about being so good, but Boston College has really turned it around too. This is a team that did not make the ACC tournament last year, and now they've been ranked for a few weeks now and have a really good offense. Joe Vetrano is a big bat in that lineup. Sean Hart's a really good uh, arm that they have in that rotation as well. So that's going to be an interesting one to look at. And then like Cal State Fullerton's now ranked. They travel to TCU this weekend for a little out of conference weekend matchup. That's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. Vanderbilt travels to Alabama. Alabama's really turned a corner as well, even though they're missing like half their pitching staff due to injury at the moment. Um, Couple more too, like Middle Tennessee, Dallas Baptist is going to be another one that's going to be interesting. Middle Tennessee has two really good arms in Eric Swan and Jaden Ham. But with Dallas Baptist, like Ryan Johnson is putting in one hell of a year out of the Friday spot. They've got a couple of really good bats in that lineup as well with Jace Grady. And then Stanford and Arizona State is also going to be a really good matchup too. Stanford has quietly just stayed in the top 10 the whole year despite some early troubles. Arizona State's really turned a corner in terms of how their game plan has evolved. Isaiah Jackson's turned into a really good freshman for that squad. And Ross Dunn has really anchored that rotation with Timmy Manning. It's going to be interesting to see how all of those series wrap up. But ultimately, like Wake Forest could probably still take down Boston College. I still got to go Stanford. Vanderbilt could probably still win on the road. The biggest question mark probably for me will probably be that Cal State Fullerton and TCU series. It'll be interesting to see how that one wraps up.
Once the conference tournaments start, which conferences do you suggest watching?
So obviously, SEC and ACC are going to be the big two. Just with how big of conferences those are, they're going to be the two with the most teams in the tournament. But if you're looking for any like mid majors that you want to try and like dive yourself into, Colonial Association League this year, CAA, they're really good, and there could be a chance for a two bids out of that league this year. Just looking at the standings now, like Northeastern and UNC Wilmington play this weekend. They're 1-2. Northeastern is 35-7, has won their last eight in a row. So they more than likely have a legitimate at-large bid. And then say if they don't win the conference tournament, UNC Wilmington's really good. Elon's really good. Charleston's starting to turn a corner. William and Mary has been a dynamic threat throughout the whole season. There's four or five teams that could really vouch for or that conference title. Another one too, Big 12 obviously is going to be big. West Virginia's turned into a real powerhouse now and up there in Morganton. JJ Weatherholt's probably one of the best bats in next year's class in terms of just hitting ability to hit for power, and he's a really good defender as well. There's going to be trying to remember another one that's going to be really good too. Sun Belt's going to be fun. We talked with Coastal Carolina and how that's going to be a pretty dynamic offense going into Montgomery. Um, Trying to think of another one that could be really fun. Um, Pac-12. We'll go Pac-12. Pac-12 looks like it could be wide open right now, and Oregon State, Stanford, Arizona State, all those teams have a real good shot at winning that tournament.
My last question is, what are your thoughts on number one ranked OSU?
LSU is one of the best teams of recent memory. Tennessee last year, I always thought was going to be one of the best ones that will savor, and it's sucked that they didn't ultimately didn't make it to Omaha, but LSU's team is a little bit better than that. Paul Skeens is still doing Steven Strasburg things. It's really, really good, and he's really played himself up to the point where LSU might be the first team to ever have, you know, teammates go 1-2 in the draft this upcoming July. Um, but they're also a little bit susceptible to, especially in the past month, to the SEC. Paul Skeens has had his ERA go from sub one to now it's like a around two right now. He struggled a little bit. The bullpen did give up it was like an 8-run lead to Alabama this past weekend. There's some holes there. I feel like they're better built for blowouts, and they kind of struggle with those close games. And their pitching staff is a little bit worn out right now. Chase Shores is obviously going to be out for the rest of the year with Tommy John surgery. Garrett Edwards, we're still waiting to see what's going to happen there. Javen Coleman's come back, so that's a good lefty to have in your bullpen. And Gavin Guidry has gone from potential two-way guy to now he's a dynamic force with a really good two-pitch combo out of the bullpen. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves over the last month here. I still think they're going to ultimately be the number one overall seed, and once we get to the NCAA tournament, but they've got some little bit of work to work out though. But when you have Dylan Cruz hitting 490 and Tommy White's right behind him in the lineup with Trey Morgan, Gavin Dugas, it's just a very deep team. And, at some point you kind of wonder, it's like, do they fall victim to what Tennessee fell victim to last year? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But Jay Johnson has really done a very good job of bringing in talent, and it's proven to be very, very beneficial at this point with the transfer portal.
It should be interesting rest of the season, and I'm definitely looking forward to watching as much of the NCAA tournament and conference tournaments in the coming weeks. And thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.